The Middle Ages are often depicted romantically and attractively, but in reality, the life of an ordinary person was grim and harsh. In this story, you become a brewer, one of those unnoticed yet indispensable people whose daily labor ensured the survival of entire villages. You will immerse yourself in a daily routine filled with dirt, disease, poverty, and the constant threat of death. This tale will lead you through all the circles of a medieval artisan's daily hell, showing just how challenging, dangerous, and hopeless their life truly was. But before you get comfortable, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is right now at your place. I'm really curious to see who's joining us today. Now, get comfortable. We're about to begin. When you open your eyes, it is not yet dawn. The air is cold, stale, heavy with the smell of mold and smoke. You lie there for a moment on your straw-filled mattress, savoring those last few seconds before your bones force you upward. You feel each ache distinctly, the stiff joints, the raw patches of skin rubbed by coarse linen, your hands still swollen and tender from yesterday's labor. You linger just enough to dread the day's beginning, but not enough to afford comfort. Reluctantly, you swing your feet onto the dirt floor, immediately greeted by the icy bite of damp earth and something that crunches beneath your heel. You pretend it is not a rat bone, but deep down you know better. This cottage, the so-called shelter you call home, is little more than a thin barrier between yourself and the bitter elements. Even in summer, you feel the creeping chill, an ever-present reminder of discomfort. You stumble around in the dark, knocking over utensils, hunting for your cloak. When you finally wrap its scratchy wool around your shoulders, you cross yourself hastily, part habit, part superstition. You have no time for a proper prayer, but the Almighty should forgive you. Surely He understands that even piety is a luxury you cannot afford in full measure. Outside, the darkness is absolute. The only illumination comes from scattered stars, distant and indifferent, and a crescent moon that seems to mock rather than guide. You must start your daily fire before sunrise. If you are late, your brewing suffers. Bad beer equals angry villagers. Angry villagers equal poverty, humiliation, or worse. The well is your first real task of the day, and it is always a hateful chore. Grabbing your buckets, you make your way across the uneven ground. Your path is obscured by shadows cast by tall, crooked trees whose branches seem poised to grab you. Their twisted shapes fuel childish nightmares still present in your adult mind. You ignore the rustling around your feet, murmuring that whatever it is, rat, snake, or spirit, it probably fears you just as much as you fear it. At least you hope so. Lowering the bucket into the darkness of the well, you brace yourself for the resistance of frigid water. It never fails to splash onto your sleeves, soaking through your garments to your bones. The chill is brutal, but it wakes you thoroughly. You pull, muscles protesting, until the bucket emerges full and spilling. It feels heavier each day, although you know it's simply your body growing weaker from malnutrition and exhaustion. Returning inside, you stare wearily at the hearth. The fire demands attention. A failure here is disastrous. Wood, however, is scarce and expensive, forcing you to ration every splinter. You curse softly as you sort through the damp logs, peeling away moss and mildew, knowing fully that no matter how meticulously you prepare, the fire will inevitably splutter and smoke, tainting your brew and stinging your eyes. Kindling catches slowly. You lean in, blowing on it, inhaling smoke and ash that makes you cough violently. You curse again, louder this time, your words echoing hollowly around your tiny workspace. You are grateful your neighbors are still sleeping and cannot hear you blaspheme, although they undoubtedly do the same behind their own closed doors. Your brewing room is an ugly space, dark beams caked in soot, cobwebs shimmering grotesquely in the faint firelight. The equipment is primitive at best. Clay pots cracked and leaking, copper kettles dented and blackened, their handles loose, threatening to spill their scalding contents on your blistered hands. Every item you possess is well used, beaten by constant abuse. There is no money for replacements, only repairs. Endless, futile repairs. You mix flour and water, creating a paste to patch up holes and leaks temporarily. The grain itself is poor, infested with weevils, and crawling with creatures you no longer bother removing. What difference would it make? The village has low expectations, after all, and insects in beer are hardly the worst thing they've consumed. Still, it unsettles you as you see them squirming, briefly hoping the boiling water will purify your efforts enough to avoid poisoning the entire community. As your crude patchwork dries, you gather barley, hard, bitter, gritty, and start your daily prayer to Saint Arnold, patron of brewers. It is more pleading than devotion, full of quiet desperation. Saint Arnold, you whisper, protect me from sickness, contamination, and humiliation. Grant my ale strength and clarity, or at least do not allow me to poison anyone important enough to have me hanged. You know the saint must be weary of your ceaseless petitions by now, but superstition is as vital to your brew as barley or hops. Speaking of hops, you grimace as you inspect the small sack in the corner. These precious cones, once so fresh, are now brittle and musty, giving off a faintly unpleasant odor. They have lost much potency, just another reason your beer is thin and sour. Still, it is better than nothing. Without hops, the ale spoils even quicker, turning rancid in a matter of days. You pause to rub your aching back, already feeling the relentless ache of brewing ahead. Soon you will lift heavy kettles, risking burns as boiling liquid splashes, all while inhaling steam thick enough to choke. Your lungs always burn by midday, a permanent condition you no longer question or complain about. It is simply another aspect of this weary life you accepted long ago. Morning light slowly filters through the cracks in the wooden walls, and the village around you awakens. You hear distant voices, arguing, laughing bitterly, or moaning prayers. None sound happy, yet there is a strange comfort in knowing you are not alone in your misery. The village is a living testament to shared hardship, poverty, and resignation. You cast another handful of twigs into the fire, watching the flames leap weakly before settling back down. Discouraged as you know that today's tasks will repeat tomorrow and the next day, stretching into a bleak, foreseeable future. Your daily labors are Sisyphean, endless, repetitive, and exhausting. Each day, you roll the stone uphill only for it to crush you anew. Outside, the first customers of the day gather expectantly, already thirsty despite the early hour. Soon you will face their sullen faces, complaints, and occasional threats, selling beer that barely satisfies even the lowest standards. But for now, you enjoy the last few seconds of quiet dread, breathing in the smoke filled air. Life, you bitterly muse, has never tasted quite so sour. You take a deep, ragged breath before stepping fully into the brewing chamber. The first sensation is always overwhelming, a rancid blend of mustiness, fermented grain, mold, and sweat that clings to everything around you. The smell is aggressive, oppressive, yet strangely comforting in its predictability. After all, this is your domain, your daily battlefield. Every inch of this place reminds you precisely how hopelessly trapped you are in the grinding wheel of existence. Your gaze falls upon the great copper kettle, stained and scarred by years of abuse. It's battered and dented, and patches of verdigris mar its once shining surface. These greenish stains taint your brew slightly, but who are you to argue with corrosion? Copper is costly, repairs costlier still, and your patrons, peasants, monks, and soldiers alike, do not expect perfection, only intoxication. As you prepare for the day's brewing, you reflect bitterly that quality is not your vocation, mere survival is. You haul heavy sacks of barley malt onto your rough workbench. Each sack weighs as much as a grown child, and in every day your back and shoulders ache from the repetitive, punishing labor. You open the first sack and recoil involuntarily at the swarm of beetles scuttling desperately away from the sudden exposure to daylight. With practiced indifference, you sweep them aside, knowing many more remain hidden. Those unfortunate creatures that evade your glance will find themselves boiled alive within your brew, their tiny bodies dissolving quietly into obscurity. You have long since given up any romantic notions of purity or cleanliness. This is medieval reality, cruelly indifferent to sanitation. Perhaps your patrons even consider insects a subtle form of nourishment. Who can say? Your hands begin mixing malted barley into hot water. It should be a simple task, but it is inevitably painful. Your knuckles crack and sting as grain and grit rub against raw flesh, exacerbating yesterday's cuts and scrapes. Your fingertips are perpetually blistered and inflamed from constant exposure to hot water, rough surfaces, and harsh ingredients. There is never time for wounds to heal completely, never enough rest to recover fully. Next comes the boiling. You fill the kettle laboriously, each bucketful of water sloshing dangerously close to scalding you. You've lost count of the burns decorating your arms, red, angry marks chronicling your daily misfortune. Despite your caution, boiling wort inevitably splashes onto your exposed skin, the pain sharp and familiar, a bitter confirmation of your daily struggles. There is no salve but patience, no medicine but endurance. Steam quickly fills the brewing chamber, creating an oppressive, suffocating atmosphere. Breathing becomes difficult, the air thick and heavy in your lungs, exacerbating the chronic cough that plagues you year round. The steam condenses upon the beams overhead, dripping back onto you in cold, clammy droplets mingling sweat and dirt into a gritty coating on your skin. Within minutes, your clothes cling uncomfortably, sodden and heavy with moisture, ensuring that chills and fever will haunt you by nightfall. You add hops with bitter resignation. This precious plant is supposed to give your beer a semblance of freshness, preserving it against spoilage, but the cones you possess are dry and brittle, their potency diminished. They crumble miserably between your fingers, filling the air with dust and a musty herbal aroma barely distinguishable from the dankness already saturating the brewery. Yet you throw them in anyway, knowing their minimal effect is preferable to nothing at all. As you stir the wort with a crude wooden paddle, your aching muscles protest with every turn. The paddle itself is rough and splintered, piercing your palms repeatedly despite thickening calluses. Occasionally, splinters lodge deep, invisible beneath your skin, festering later into swollen infections. But these pains have become so routine, you barely register them consciously. They are simply part of brewing's constant agony, like the dripping ceiling or the rats darting across the floor. Indeed, vermin are constant companions. Rats scurry freely about your feet, emboldened by familiarity. You've long stopped attempting to frighten them away. Your threats are meaningless, your movements too predictable. They gnaw through sacks, spoil your grain, and contaminate everything they touch. Yet extermination is impossible. Poison is too expensive and risky. Cats prove unreliable, and traps rarely yield lasting results. Instead, you have accepted rats as fellow tenants, resigned to their parasitic company as just another unavoidable indignity. Time drags onward as the wort boils vigorously, filling your workspace with a deafening bubbling and hissing. Sweat runs freely down your forehead, stinging your eyes, blending indistinguishably with condensation. You must watch the kettle constantly, vigilant against overflowing foam. A minor mistake easily becomes disaster. Yet your concentration is dulled by fatigue, hunger, and lingering illnesses. It is a ceaseless struggle, human fragility versus endless labor, always teetering on the brink of disaster. Once the boiling completes, you must cool the wort. This process, though straightforward, is grueling in execution. You ladle hot liquid into shallow wooden tubs, sloshing it carefully to hasten cooling. The aroma released is pungent, bordering on foul, indicative of questionable ingredients and contamination you'd rather ignore. You must cool quickly, lest your wort turn sour. Yet haste means danger. One slip, and scalding fluid cascades over your skin again. Such mistakes occur regularly enough that you scarcely bother swearing anymore, just sighing deeply as fresh burns accumulate. Finally, you transfer cooled wort into open barrels to ferment. Yeast, the invisible, capricious creature, will now do its mysterious work. You whisper a quick prayer that fermentation proceeds smoothly, though experience suggests your hopes are futile. Contamination and spoilage threaten constantly, yet you lack the tools or knowledge to reliably prevent either. Instead, you rely heavily upon superstition, prayers, and luck, methods that have betrayed you far too frequently already. Exhausted and aching profoundly, you survey your day's labor. Your brewery is a scene of chaos, grime, and quiet desperation. A thick film of grain and dust covers every surface. Puddles of spilled liquid attract swarms of insects. There is no time or strength left for thorough cleaning, only minimal tidying to stave off outright filth. Tomorrow, it all begins again anyway, dirt accumulating faster than your ability to remove it. Outside, dusk approaches, casting long, melancholy shadows across your weary face. Your limbs tremble slightly from exhaustion. You have survived another day of brewing, but at what cost? Health declining steadily, hope eroding, morale barely existent. Your ale, born from agony, sweat, and sorrow, will soon pass into the hands of villagers indifferent to your suffering, demanding cheap intoxication rather than craftsmanship. Yet, despite everything, pain, poverty, disease, you persist because survival is your only realistic ambition. This is medieval brewing, after all. No artistry, no glory, merely endless toil against overwhelming odds. Each day is a fresh battle, each batch a minor miracle of perseverance. As darkness falls, you limp back to your miserable cot, collapsing into exhausted slumber. Tomorrow's hardships await, but tonight, merciful oblivion claims you briefly. Sleep is your only escape, the cruel yet gentle companion in a life otherwise consumed entirely by brewing's ceaseless torment. Dawn arrives with an uncomfortable inevitability, jolting you awake once more. Your eyes open grudgingly, greeting the pale, watery light seeping through cracks in the rotting wood walls. You barely have time to feel miserable about yesterday's bruises and today's expectations before you hear them, the voices of your neighbors already gathering outside, restless, thirsty, eager to disturb your fragile peace. With a groan, you force yourself upright, limbs stiffened overnight, joints cracking like splintered branches underfoot. You pull on your rough garments, filthy from yesterday's labor, sour from endless sweat. No use changing. Clean clothing is a luxury you scarcely remember. Besides, the villagers hardly care how you look, only what you provide. Stepping out of your hut, you're greeted by grim-faced peasants, sullen monks, and a few ragged soldiers whose eyes betray nothing but irritation. They regard you with hostility thinly disguised as impatience. You feel a pang of helpless bitterness. You're their brewer, yes, but they treat you no better than livestock. Useful, necessary, but easily disposable. Your first customer, as usual, is old Wilhelm, a sour faced farmer with perpetually dirty fingernails. He has never once uttered a thank you. Instead, he begins his daily ritual of complaint before you even fill his jug. Yesterday's ale was weak, he snaps, eyes narrowed accusingly. Are you watering it down, thief? You sigh inwardly, but say nothing, merely filling his chipped jug with your cloudy, bitter brew. Arguing is pointless. Wilhelm is incapable of satisfaction. You hand over the ale, and he tosses you a few tarnished coins with obvious reluctance, muttering curses under his breath. It's barely enough money to survive, certainly never enough to thrive. The villagers behind Wilhelm shift restlessly, murmuring impatiently. They're a hardened lot, faces weathered and leathery from exposure, illness, and malnutrition. Your ale is their medicine, solace, and poison simultaneously, a necessary evil allowing them to momentarily forget their own suffering, or perhaps worsen it. The monks follow shortly after, shuffling forward in worn sandals, their expressions as joyless as their lives. You dread their presence, perhaps even more than the villagers. At least peasants openly show contempt. Monks cloak their disdain in sanctimonious judgment. Brother Anselm, a man with a permanently pursed mouth and judgmental glare, scrutinizes your ale as though seeking proof of mortal sin. This ale, he says slowly, lips curled in distaste, seems tainted with worldly impurity. You would do well to cleanse your soul, brewer. You bow your head deferentially, masking your urge to pour ale directly onto his pious sandals. Of course, brother, I shall seek repentance. He nods stiffly, unconvinced, tossing a tiny coin onto your bench with disdainful precision. You marvel grimly how religion, for all its talk of charity and humility, so rarely translates into generosity when ale is concerned. As the monks shuffle away, you see soldiers approaching, men at arms from the local lord's manor. They arrive loud, boisterous, and aggressive, throwing their weight around as though your humble brewery is a conquered fortress. Sergeant Klaus, leader of these miserable ruffians, leans over your counter, breath reeking of onions and decay. You'd best have something better than yesterday, he growls threateningly, fingering his rusty sword hilt. My men were ill from your swill. You feel an involuntary shiver run down your spine, knowing well what happens to brewers accused of poisoning soldiers. Trials, humiliation, public punishment, or worse, death. Your heart pounds painfully, though outwardly you remain composed. Forgive me, Sergeant. Today's batch is fresh, no illness, I promise. You lie smoothly, hoping desperately your ale hasn't spoiled overnight. Klaus eyes you suspiciously, but finally grunts, allowing you to fill his filthy tankard. He snatches it, drinks greedily, then wipes foam from his mouth with a grubby sleeve. You'll live another day, brewer, he sneers, dropping a small handful of battered coins on the bench. He turns abruptly, leaving behind the lingering threat of violence. Morning drags onward, each customer a miniature trial, each transaction laced with resentment or thinly veiled hostility. Occasionally, A drunken villager becomes openly aggressive, shouting accusations or insults. You have learned to endure quietly, always wary of escalation. Yet today, trouble erupts anyway. Two men, Johann and Dietrich, farmhands perpetually at odds, stumble toward your stall, already intoxicated from yesterday's remnants. Johann's voice rises in irritation. Dietrich responds by pushing him roughly, and suddenly fists fly, bodies crash against your barrels, splintering wood and spilling precious ale onto the filthy ground. You rush forward helplessly, begging them to stop, but they ignore you completely, locked in savage combat. Only when other villagers drag them apart does the violence subside, leaving you standing miserably amid broken barrels, spilled ale soaking into dirt, now worthless. Your despair deepens as you assess the damage. Repairs cost money you do not possess. You want to curse, scream, or cry, but no emotion surfaces. You are numb, weary of constant setbacks and disappointment. Survival demands silence, suppression of despair. Later, village elders summon you to explain the incident publicly. You stand shamefaced and defeated before the grim assembly, peasants, monks, and local lords staring down judgmentally. Your explanations fall on deaf ears. Somehow, blame always returns to you. Your ale provoked violence. Your weakness allowed destruction. The humiliation is unbearable, yet you must bear it nonetheless, nodding silently, enduring shame as a necessary condition of your miserable existence. Finally dismissed, you return home exhausted and humiliated, retreating to your cramped, dark hut, locking the flimsy wooden door behind you, knowing locks scarcely matter against truly angry villagers. Your hands tremble slightly, fear, exhaustion, despair all mingled indistinguishably. Evening falls, and still villagers pound angrily on your door, demanding late night drink to drown sorrows you cannot heal. Their voices become distant echoes, hollow, meaningless. You've no strength left to face their demands tonight. Instead, you sit in shadow, bitterly contemplating the impossible task before you, pleasing a community determined never to be satisfied. Sleep comes eventually, grudgingly, yet mercifully. You dream of happier days, days you've never truly known, but still somehow miss. In dreams, villagers smile gratefully, monks praise your virtue, and soldiers salute respectfully. You awake shivering, bitterly aware of your folly. Dreams fade quickly under cold reality. Morning arrives once more, as hateful as ever, but today, something deep within you shifts slightly. You know that this harsh cycle, daily abuse, ceaseless humiliation, defines your existence. There is no escape, only endurance. Each day, you must repeat this miserable ritual, brewing beer, serving neighbors who hate you, enduring their abuse, quietly surviving. You step outside again, facing those grim, familiar faces. They await their ale, impatient, hostile, entitled. You feel their eyes heavy upon you, judging harshly, endlessly. Your heart sinks further, but you accept it now with resignation. Your neighbors, peasants, monks, soldiers alike, are neither friends nor allies. They're simply another cruel aspect of this oppressive life, another hardship endured silently. Survival demands toleration, silence, endurance. This, you finally understood, is your bitter, unending reality. Your daily grind continues relentlessly, each dawn more exhausting, each evening more painful than the last. You've learned to navigate brewing's constant hazards, boiling kettles, splintered barrels, belligerent neighbors, but now something else becomes clear. Survival is a precarious balancing act against death itself. Every minor injury you once brushed off now seems intent on claiming your life, and in your dismal medieval world, death lurks everywhere, eager to collect. Your day begins as usual, with aching bones and a heaviness in your chest that never truly leaves. You cough violently, each spasm rattling through your ribs like splintering timber. This cough has plagued you for months, a stubborn companion from breathing damp air thickened by mold and smoke. Your neighbors call it a curse. Your local priest claims divine punishment for hidden sins. You simply call it inevitable, another harsh reminder of your body's fragile state. Today, however, something feels worse. A dull, throbbing ache settles deep within your lungs, sharp pangs intensifying with each ragged breath. Your limbs feel heavier, movements sluggish, as though wading through thick mud. Feverish chills creep slowly upward from your feet, winding through every joint and muscle, yet still you push onward. Work demands your presence. Sickness is a luxury reserved for the wealthy or already dead. In the brewery, you gather strength to lift a sack of grain, but your weakened grip slips. The sack falls awkwardly, smashing painfully against your foot. Agonizing pain shoots through your leg, yet you remain stoic, eyes watering silently. Limping now, you kneel to inspect damage, the grain spilled everywhere, mingling with filth. You curse quietly, knowing that your injured foot, likely broken or badly bruised, will only slow you down further, making work even more punishing. There is no doctor to consult, only a village healer, a woman of questionable methods, whispered rumors of witchcraft trailing behind her. With no choice left, you hobble slowly toward her hovel at the village edge, heart sinking further with each painful step. Inside, the healer regards you coldly, lips curling into an unsettling smile. Come again, brewer? Have your sins caught up to you finally? You mumble quietly, ignoring her insults. She gestures impatiently for you to sit upon a crude wooden stool. You comply, wincing as she prods roughly at your swollen foot, ignoring your sharp intakes of breath. Fracture, she says casually, or worse. Her voice betrays neither sympathy nor concern. She shuffles away, returning with herbal poultices smelling strongly of decay and unknown plant matter. Your stomach churns instinctively. She applies the poultice roughly, pain intensifying until you feel nauseous, dizziness clouding your vision. Now rest, she commands sharply. But I suppose rest is another luxury you cannot afford. Indeed, you must return immediately. Your brewery cannot survive unattended, and rest would mean ruin or starvation. Limping homeward, each step a fresh torment, you reflect bitterly on medieval medicine, crude, painful, often futile, yet your only lifeline against infection or death. At the brewery, each moment of labor is agony. Your foot pulses painfully, infection already spreading silently beneath a herbal poultices. You push onward regardless, stirring kettles, carrying buckets, desperation, numbing physical torment slightly. But soon fever worsens, clarity fading into confusion. Your hands tremble dangerously, splashing hot wort onto your arm, blistering skin anew. Your wounds multiply rapidly now. Infected foot, burned arm, bruised and bleeding knuckles from ceaseless labor. You bandage them hastily with dirty rags, aware infection festers beneath layers of filth. In medieval times, even minor injuries can prove fatal swiftly, infection spreading rapidly through unsanitary conditions. You understand this danger intimately now, heart heavy with dread. Your cough worsens steadily, violent spasms shaking your weakened body violently each night. Sleep becomes elusive, fleeting moments of restless unconsciousness punctuated by fits of hacking, choking agony. Your neighbors complain bitterly at your nighttime noise, indifferent to your pain, angry only at disrupted slumber. Still, you endure stubbornly. Surrendering means certain death, and despite suffering, you cling desperately to life, no matter how cruel or punishing that life might be. Days blur together indistinctly now. Fever clouds your perception, each brewing task completed mechanically, survival instinct stronger than conscious thought. Villagers notice your pallor, your gaunt cheeks hollowed by prolonged illness, yet offer neither help nor sympathy. Instead, they whisper darkly, your sickness, divine retribution, proof of moral corruption. You hear their words vaguely, too weary to dispute lies or defend your dignity. One morning, weakness overcomes you completely. Rising from bed, you collapse onto dirt flooring, unable even to stand. Consciousness wavers precariously, darkness encroaching rapidly upon vision's edges. In this moment, you understand clearly. Death has arrived finally, patiently, awaiting surrender. But stubborn instinct rallies faintly once more. Crawling desperately toward your ale barrel, you scoop handfuls of bitter, yeasty liquid into dry, cracked lips. Ale is your crude medicine, solace against pain, hydration against fever. Slowly, faint strength returns enough to lift yourself upright again, though barely. Death retreats temporarily, disappointed perhaps, but confident in eventual victory. Over days that follow, fever slowly subsides, leaving you weaker but alive somehow. Infection in your foot fades grudgingly, though the limb remains swollen, permanently damaged now. Your cough persists stubbornly, lungs damaged irreparably, each breath labored and painful forevermore. Yet, incredibly, you survive still, though diminished greatly. Eventually, villagers grudgingly acknowledge your endurance. Stubborn as a mule, old Wilhelm mutters sourly, clearly disappointed by your survival. Monks whisper suspiciously, perhaps he has darker forces aiding him. You ignore their whispers, too exhausted even to feel resentment anymore. Life resumes gradually, each day slightly less punishing, though permanent damage remains. Limping becomes permanent gait. Your cough, lifelong companion, your weakened constitution, forever vulnerable. Death remains close neighbor, constant reminder of fragility and inevitability. You understand now clearly. Life in medieval brewing, indeed life generally, is an endless dance upon death's precipice, each misstep potentially fatal. In rare quiet moments, you reflect soberly upon experiences endured recently, pain, fear, survival itself. You marvel bitterly at medieval medicine's cruelty, superstition's indifference, neighbors' coldness toward suffering. Yet despite it all, you still stubbornly cling to life, aware intimately how precarious, painful survival remains. For now, death retreats into shadows temporarily, patient hunter content, awaiting future opportunities. You acknowledge grimly death's patience, aware intimately you cheated only momentarily. Soon enough, injuries or illness return inevitably. Until then, however, you persist stubbornly, each breath defiant challenge against death's eventual inevitability. Life, after all, demands stubborn endurance, particularly in your harsh, punishing world. You've survived once more, cheating death temporarily, but fully aware your daily struggles continue indefinitely. Until death finally claims inevitable victory, you endure quietly, stubbornly resisting darkness, encroaching relentlessly upon your fragile existence. The days stretch onward endlessly, each blending indistinguishably into the next, a monotonous blur of brewing, suffering, humiliation, and exhaustion. Your existence has become one continuous, relentless grind against poverty and illness. You no longer remember what hope feels like. Optimism is now an unfamiliar stranger whose face you barely recall. Morning again. Your weary eyes open slowly, greeted as always by the same grim ceiling, warped wooden beams infested with beetles, mold creeping quietly across damp surfaces. Your bones ache constantly, muscles sore and stiff from yesterday's labor, from a lifetime of labor. You lie still briefly, knowing soon enough your battered body will be forced back into motion, back into the familiar misery of your daily routine. You finally rise, coughing violently as always, your lungs protesting fiercely with each rattling breath. You pause briefly, waiting for pain to subside enough for movement. Eventually, you limp heavily outside, into the bitter morning air, preparing once again to face your inescapable duties. Your brewery awaits in all its grim reality, broken barrels patched repeatedly, worn kettles blackened by endless fires, filthy floors stained permanently by spilled wort and years of grime. You no longer notice the filth. Dirt has become as natural as breathing. Cleanliness remains a distant, unreachable luxury. Every corner reminds you clearly of poverty's endless torment, never enough money for repairs, never enough resources for improvement, never a moment's respite from exhausting labor. You begin your brewing tasks mechanically, barely registering actions anymore. Boil water, mash grain, add hops, cool wort, ferment ale. Each step burned deeply into your subconscious through endless repetition. Your hands move numbly, almost independently from conscious thought, instinctively repeating actions performed the thousands of times before. Your neighbors appear predictably as morning progresses, their impatient voices demanding ale despite your obvious exhaustion. They notice your condition: gaunt frame, pale face, perpetual cough, yet show no sympathy. Survival in the village means indifference, not compassion. Kindness is scarce, replaced entirely by weary resignation. You fill their cups wordlessly, feeling nothing but empty bitterness with each transaction. Coins exchanged barely cover expenses, let alone offer hope of comfort or advancement. Each evening you count earnings carefully, heart sinking further each time realization strikes. You will never escape poverty's grasp. Debt accumulates inevitably, owed to village elders, owed for raw ingredients, owed to the healer whose ineffective poultices prolong suffering rather than heal. Each new coin earned immediately disappears, devoured instantly by endless obligations. Food remains sparse, scarcely enough sustenance to maintain strength. Meals are tasteless, monotonous, always the same bland porridge, stale bread, occasional dried meat toughened by age. Hunger gnaws continually, never truly satisfied. Malnutrition weakens your body steadily, vulnerability increasing daily. Yet you endure stubbornly, driven forward by primal instinct. Survival, however miserable, remains preferable to starvation's final cruelty. Family obligations weigh heavily also. Your children, thin, hollow eyed, growing quickly yet malnourished always, require constant support. Their faces remind you bitterly of personal failure, inability to provide adequately, inability to shield from poverty's harsh realities. Yet family love persists stubbornly amid suffering, offering faint emotional solace despite relentless hardships endured collectively. Your spouse works tirelessly alongside you, her hands equally calloused, face equally weary. Conversation becomes rare, exhaustion silencing intimacy. Yet quiet companionship persists. Shared suffering binds tightly, deeper perhaps than happiness ever could. You remain united stubbornly against poverty's crushing weight, each silently grateful for the other's endurance, mutual survival fueling quiet affection beneath exhausted appearances. Religion provides little comfort, only hollow words and meaningless rituals. Priests preach patience and piety, yet poverty continues unaffected. Prayer feels futile. Divine intervention never arrives. Divine mercy conspicuously absent amid ceaseless torment. Heaven remains distant, indifferent perhaps, while earthly existence persists relentlessly miserable. Yet still you pray occasionally, habit stronger perhaps than actual belief, desperation stronger certainly than faith. Evenings pass slowly, exhaustion deepening as darkness descends gradually. Villagers retreat to huts quietly, collapsing quickly into restless sleep. You remain awake longer, inspecting ale barrels carefully. Spoilage threatens constantly. Contamination is inevitable eventually. One spoiled barrel spells financial ruin, starvation potentially. Vigilance remains crucial, yet exhausting, anxiety increasing continually. Sleep finally arrives reluctantly, dreams filled inevitably by brewing's ceaseless tasks, poverty's persistent worries, neighbors' relentless complaints. Rest remains shallow, interrupted frequently by coughing fits and bodily pain. Mornings arrive quickly, always. Exhaustion never alleviated completely. You rise daily feeling barely rested, weariness accumulating constantly without relief. As days continue blending indistinguishably, your physical health deteriorates further steadily. Cough deepens permanently, lungs damaged irreparably by damp air and perpetual smoke inhalation. Joints ache constantly, bones weakened gradually by malnutrition's persistent cruelty. Mobility decreases subtly, each step slightly more painful than before. Death's inevitability feels increasingly tangible, patience strained gradually, yet persistently. Yet despite everything endured, poverty, illness, injury, exhaustion, you persist stubbornly. Perhaps survival instinct remains stronger even than pain endured daily. Perhaps family obligations outweigh personal suffering. Perhaps stubborn pride prevents complete surrender. Whatever reason motivates, continued endurance remains uncertain clearly, yet survival continues stubbornly nevertheless. Your brewery remains both prison and lifeline simultaneously, endless labor demanded daily, yet also source of minimal income necessary desperately. Without brewing, starvation claims you inevitably, yet brewing itself hastens bodily destruction gradually. Paradoxically trapped firmly within brewing's endless cycle, escape impossible completely, resignation inevitable finally. You understand clearly now. Hope was illusion always. Optimism, naive misunderstanding, completely medieval existence's brutal realities. Life is perpetual endurance test. Survival itself only true accomplishment, achievable realistically. Expecting improvement or comfort remains foolish fantasy. Acceptance remains wisest response ultimately to inevitable hardships endured. So you continue daily, brewing mechanically, enduring silently, providing reluctantly for neighbors indifferent completely toward personal suffering. Families survive stubbornly despite poverty, strength found somehow amid collective misery. Existence itself remains deeply unsatisfying, certainly, yet stubbornly persistent nevertheless. Death remains close constantly, patiently awaiting inevitable victory finally. Yet until then, life continues stubbornly, each day identical endlessly, each hardship endured quietly, yet persistently. Medieval brewing indeed reflects existence generally, relentlessly harsh, endlessly exhausting, hope absent completely realistically. Yet you continue daily, despite everything, stubbornly refusing surrender completely. Perhaps endurance itself offers faint dignity amid otherwise bleak existence. Perhaps quiet strength amid ceaseless torment remains only true legacy, achievable ultimately. Whatever reason motivates endurance daily remains uncertain clearly, yet survival persists stubbornly regardless. Tomorrow inevitably repeats today's hardships, endured endlessly previously. Yet somehow, inexplicably perhaps, you continue still stubbornly. Life without hope remains bleak, certainly, yet somehow stubbornly persistent, regardless, until death finally claims inevitable victory. You endure quietly yet stubbornly always. Existence offers little satisfaction, clearly, yet survival itself remains stubbornly persistent, nevertheless. You rise slowly once more, facing another identical day reluctantly. Life continues stubbornly yet bleakly onward, each breath another defiant yet quiet challenge against inevitable darkness approaching constantly. Hope remains absent completely certainly, yet stubborn survival persists stubbornly regardless.